Good morning, everyone. National Commander Contreras, National Adjutant Jasanowski, fellow delegates and guests. I'm honored once again to be with you to provide a report on the activities and accomplishments of DAV's national service and legislative programs since we last met in Phoenix. Since it's Sunday morning, I wanted to start by answering a question that many of you have been wondering. Do Las Vegas churches accept gambling chips? I know it's been on your mind. Now, this may come as a surprise, but there are actually more churches than casinos in Las Vegas. And not surprisingly, many worshipers will give casino chips rather than cash when the basket's passed around. I know some of you did at the memorial service, especially you. Since the churches get chips from many different casinos, they created a system to cash in all those offerings. They send all their collected chips from around the city to a nearby Franciscan monastery for sorting, and then the chips are taken to each of the casinos of origin. They get cashed in, and the money is returned to each church. And believe it or not, all of this work, all over the city, is done by the chipmunks. I guess my comedy act won't make Las Vegas strip. Seriously, though, in many ways, the past year has been a very challenging one in Washington, D.C. First, there was the endless partisan and political battles during last fall's election campaigns. And after the election, rather than calming the waters down, the dynamics of hyper-partisanship have come to dominate our politics, leading to gridlock and dysfunction. In trying times like these, we look to history for context. As you know, next year we'll celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the founding document that marked the birth of our great nation. However, this year marks the 250th anniversary of a number of other historical events. In 1775, the American Revolutionary War began with battles at Lexington, Concord, and Paul Revere's famous ride. That same year, the Army, the Navy, the Marines were established to defend the freedom and rights of these new Americans. Man, that was a delayed hooah. That same year, a less famous declaration, but also drafted by Thomas Jefferson, was adopted by the Second Continental Congress to explain why the 13 colonies had taken up arms against the British Empire. Faced with increasingly harsh rule from a foreign monarch and the beginning of open hostilities, the Declaration of the Causes and necessity of taking up arms affirmed that government was instituted to promote the welfare of mankind and ought to be administered to the attainment of that end. The arms we have been compelled by our enemies to assume, we will, in defiance of every hazard, with unabating firmness and perseverance, employ for the preservation of our liberties. These same liberties that American armed forces have defended for 250 years, and its choir nation has a sacred obligation to keep our promises to all those who have served. Since we last gathered in Phoenix, there have been some victories for veterans, but also troubling signs that could lay ahead. Though it took until the very final day of the 118th Congress, we did have one, but only one significant veterans law enacted last year. the Senator Elizabeth Dole 21st Century Veterans Health Care and Benefits Improvement Act. This law contains a number of important reforms and improvements to veterans programs and services. The Dole Act will strengthen VA's caregiver support programs, expand access to home and community-based services for aging and disabled veterans at every VA medical center. It will give tens of thousands more veterans the option to receive long-term care and support in their homes rather than in a facility. The law will also help streamline the VA disability claims process, expand access to job training and employment opportunities, address veteran homelessness, strengthen mental health care services, and so much more. While this was an important legislative victory for veterans, unfortunately, the decade-long trend of hyperpartisanship amongst all of our political parties is accelerating, often paralyzing Congress and the federal government. Right now, it's not clear whether Congress and the administration will even be able to pass a new budget for next year, or whether we'll once again have a government shutdown. None of this political dysfunction is good for the country, and it's certainly not good for veterans. Frankly, it's not good for Congress either, as any pollster will tell you. Congressional approval today remains at one of the lowest levels ever. And since we're in Nevada, only about 100 miles from Area 51, let me ask you a question. What's the difference between a UFO and an honest politician? It's possible that UFOs exist. I might not be able to go home now. But while politicians may bicker, veterans understand that to achieve our mission, we need to be united in our purpose. As Ford Motor Company founder Henry Ford once said, "Coming together is the beginning. Keeping together is progress, and working together is success." We know from experience that working together is the only way to make real, lasting progress, particularly when it comes to Congress and VA keeping the promises to those who have served. From the Appeals Modernization Act of 2017, to the Mission Act of 2018, to the PACT Act of 2022, and the Dole Act just last year, 2024, when Congress and the VA, Republicans and Democrats, work hand in hand with veteran service organizations, veterans, we can and have achieved landmark reforms and progress. But none of this would happen without all the visits, the calls, and emails that you send to your representatives and senators. In fact, during the 118th Congress, you sent almost 1.3 million emails in support of pro-veteran legislation. All of this through the DAV Commanders Action Network, DAV CAN. So thank you again so very much. Thanks to the strength you provide us, DAV continues to be the leading voice for America's ill and injured veterans. In the 118th Congress, our legislative team was able to hold almost 800 meetings on Capitol Hill, at the VA, the White House, to educate Congress, policymakers, to advocate for our critical policy goals and our legislative goals. Because of DAV's expertise, we were invited to present testimony to congressional committees, participate in roundtables, and make other formal presentations nearly 50 times. And DAV is once again taking that same proactive approach on Capitol Hill to push DAV's veterans agenda forward this year, no matter what political obstacles we may face. One of our top priorities is strengthening the laws addressing military toxic exposures. Building on the success of the PACT Act, Last fall, DAV released our Ending the Wait report, Ending the Wait for Toxic Exposed Veterans, produced in partnership with the Military Officers Association of America, MOA. This groundbreaking report, which we presented to Congress at a Capitol Hill briefing, contains innovative research, historical analysis, and a series of recommendations to reform how VA acknowledges, compensates, and cares for veterans with toxic injuries from their military service. Since the start of the new year and the new Congress, we have been building key coalitions and drafting new toxic exposure legislation we hope to see introduced later this year. Never again should any toxic exposed veteran have to wait decades to receive the recognition, benefits, and health care they earn. Another critical priority is strengthening VA's mental health care and suicide prevention programs, especially for our women veterans. Last fall, DAV co-hosted a bipartisan Capitol Hill briefing on women veterans' mental health, suicide prevention, and intimate partner violence. We were also proud to once again play a major role in supporting VA's quadrennial Women Veterans Summit. This event gathered women veterans, advocates from across the nation to bring attention to the challenges and potential solutions for systemic, persistent issues that our women veterans face every day. With your tireless advocacy, we're continuing to push for new legislation to close the gaps in mental health care, that no women veterans fall through these deadly cracks ever again. Earlier this year, a plan to reduce the VA workforce by up to 15%. A cut of 70 to 80,000 VA employees was made public by a leaked document representing a potential new threat to our VA healthcare system. As the heaviest users of VA care, DAV members, our members, know VA isn't perfect. And when we see problems, we call it out. But we also offer solutions. But we also know that VA remains an irreplaceable national system of care designed specifically to care for those who were wounded, injured, or made ill from their military service. So with record numbers of veterans enrolling, utilizing, and relying on VA, we have an obligation to strengthen and sustain the VA system. While DAV will always support efforts to make VA more effective and more efficient, the magnitude of these cuts initially reported could have threatened VA's ability to remain the primary provider and coordinator of medical care, particularly for the millions of veterans who need and who choose to use VA. The Secretary's recent announcement that the reduction will be almost 30,000 jobs is obviously much less. But it's still a major change with potential negative impact on care and benefits delivery if it's not implemented carefully. And the fact it was done without any consultation or discussion with DAV or any other veteran service organization is a major concern. While we remain hopeful it can be accomplished without significant impacts on the delivery of health care and benefits, we have many unanswered questions. How will this be done? How will we be able to do more with less? Now, rest assured, we will continue to ask these questions, monitor implementation, and we will oppose any efforts to weaken the one and the only healthcare system operated specifically for the benefit of America's veterans. Former South African President Nelson Mandela once said, "What counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made in the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." At DAV, we have and continue to make a difference in the lives of disabled veterans each and every day. First and foremost, through our service programs. As with our legislative victories, DAV service programs are successful because of the team we have across the entire country. Thousands of department, chapter, and even county service officers who work hand in hand with our national transition and national service officers. That's why we continue to invest in the people who do this work. We recently incorporated department and chapter service officer training into DAV's iTrack learning platform. It will allow all service officers now to expand their knowledge by acquiring resources that were previously only available to our national service officers. DSOs and CSOs are now able to take training online, obtain their certificates, and receive a more in-depth training experience, a major improvement for departments and chapters nationwide. Department and chapter service officers will now utilize DAV's case management system to deliver claims to NSO offices, greatly improving the security of our clients' personal information. The CMS system allows and provides for service officers to have better organized record keeping, quick access to client contact information, and the ability to submit claims to our NSO offices in real time. I'm also proud to share that DAV's Structured and Continued Training Program recently had its triennial American Council on Education review. It was completed this year, and the Council clearly recognized the substantial effort required of our national service officers to complete this training. As a result, DAV's Structured Continued Training Program will continue to provide 15 college credit hours to all of those who complete the training. Through this and other initiatives that DAV invests in our people, we can be certain that when it comes to helping veterans get their earned benefits, DAV remains second to none. Our service team is also focused on exploring new ways to reach veterans where they are. We continue to expand our outreach to rural and remote areas to assist and inform veterans about DAV's mission. In 2024, our NSO Corps conducted more than 500 information seminars across the country, reaching more than 18,000 participants. Our NSOs also assisted VA regional offices and other organizations with numerous outreach events, including PACT Act events, homeless stand-down initiatives, job fairs, and many more. We have more than 24 transition service officers strategically located on military installations across the country. They assist servicemen and women transitioning out of the military. Last year, our TSOs conducted almost 1,000 DoD Transition Assistance Program briefings, TAP, to educate departing service members on DAV services, VA benefits, and other crucial information. DAV is also expanding our outreach efforts to assist Native and tribal veterans who have one of the highest per capita representations in our armed forces, but are often among the most underserved. I'm pleased to report we're close to establishing these new relationships with tribal government officials, fellow nonprofit organizations, and other tribal leaders to ensure these veterans have equitable access to all of their earned VA benefits and health care services. At the same time, we continue to be on the outlook for unscrupulous companies seeking to prey upon veterans. That's right, 50 years after the premiere of the movie Jaws, we must continue fighting to protect thousands of veterans each year from the jaws of claim sharks. These companies charge exorbitant sums of money to consult and assist veterans with seeking what they've already earned in VA benefits. These claim sharks are not VA accredited and do not meet the ethical standards that DAV service officers adhere to. Veterans should not have to pay for their benefits that they've already earned through their service and sacrifice. And rest assured, we will continue fighting for federal legislation to stop claim sharks before they attack.
Smile, you son of a...
So much for that claim shark. I'm so proud to report that over the past year, DAV was able to assist thousands of our fellow veterans in need after major disasters. In 2024, our NSO offices issued 2,300 disaster relief checks totaling more than $1.4 million in support of veterans in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina who fell victim to Hurricanes Helene and Milton, as well as those impacted by tornadoes and floods in Kentucky, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and many more at other locations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what DAV does. This is what you do. This is who we are. Finally, I want to mark two other anniversaries. 80 years ago this September, World War II ended in the Pacific. And though less than 1% of veterans in that conflict remain, our obligations to them and their survivors live on. And earlier this year, we commemorated the 50th anniversary of the official end of the Vietnam War, marked by the fall of Saigon on April 30, 1975. Although the United States' formal military involvement had ended 2 years earlier with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords in January of 1973, the final act for our armed forces took place 50 years ago with Operation Frequent Wind, the largest helicopter evacuation in history. In the final days and hours of April 1975, the U.S. Army, the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force all worked together to airlift thousands of American citizens, fellow service members, and at-risk Vietnamese from Saigon before the city was captured by the advancing North Vietnamese Army. Under desperate and dangerous conditions, in less than 48 hours, dozens of military helicopters rescued more than 7,000 people, taking them from the roof of the U.S. Embassy to the U.S. Navy and other ships waiting for them offshore, under the protection of Air Force jets and other military aircraft. While the political history of the United States and Vietnam and the war's outcome may remain controversial still today, there is absolutely no debate about the service and the honor of the soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who risked their lives right up and until the final helicopter departed Saigon. Now, some 50 years later, many of these same Vietnam veterans are still seeking the full measure of justice for all they have earned through their courageous service and sacrifice. These are the stories that inspire our mission, making certain that no veteran is left behind, especially for lack of benefits or lack of VA health care. And with your continued help, God's grace, I remain confident that DAV can and will continue to do our part in keeping America's promises to the men and women who have served, their families, caregivers, and survivors. Thank you all so very much. Commander, that concludes my report. I ask that it be accepted by the convention.